Welcome to another solo show for the podcast. As you can hear, I'm out walking. Currently I'm walking the old coach road that runs from, well, this particular bit runs from Firle in Sussex down to, well, towards Berwick at the moment, sort of on the way to Eastbourne. I'm sort of doing a little bit of a sort of a test run, well, not a run, a test walk, because I'm sort of planning on doing a longer walk down an old pilgrimage route called the Old Way, and this is part of it. So there's, it is a January day, but it's actually so warm I've actually had to strip down to my t-shirt. I come out with a roll neck jumper on and a sort of a padded jacket, but I've got the padded jacket on and just the t-shirt, so obviously built up a bit of heat. So yeah, I'm toying around with this idea of pilgrimage routes and journey routes, and I know this is not from here, but the sort of Aboriginal ideas of songlines. I've been quite intrigued by that thing of a songline. Obviously, it has a multitude of meanings. Obviously, to do with the idea of dream time that they have, and of course, the songlines not only are their way of navigating across landscape, but they are myth cycles, storylines of the creative spirits of the land and everything. And I've always been intrigued that we obviously had something like that here before it was sort of eradicated by successive controlling powers, whether that was the Romans or Christianity or whatever. And you can see it within the ideas of standing stones and cairns and all that sort of thing, where they're in locations around the land, sort of sacred sites as we would call them. And obviously the Old Way has got a number of very interesting churches and hill forts and sort of things like that, which obviously have their power. And of course, my interest in this is artistically what that might conjure up in itself. Ideas for songs, poems, etc. And it certainly was a source of inspiration for many people in the past. I've just walked, or I'm sort of walking past, or have walked past I should say, the turning off the track, which would take me to Charleston House, which was the abode of the Bloomsbury set, the artists and radical thinkers of the time. So this area has definitely got its fair share of radical thinkers, whether you look at Thomas Paine in Lewes, and also the site of the Battle of Lewes, Henry de Montfort has got a lot of subversive thinkers, which, dare I say, I think we might need a touch of that at the moment. We seem to have got ourselves into a bit of a rut, and interestingly, I'm walking down this track, which is incredibly rutted and full of water. And of course, in the old days, this is where McAdam got his name from, he made his name for making better roads. The roads were so dangerous and rutted that it was possible to fall in, apparently, and drown in some of the holes in the road. Now, whether that's true or not was just some sort of apocryphal idea, I don't know, but apparently. So here we are, walking down a rutted road, looking at the sort of situation that we seem to have got ourselves in. We're sort of stuck in a little bit of a rut. And what does that mean? You know, does that give us a possibility of doing something about it? You know, whether that's just artistic or not. So there's been a sort of resurgence in pilgrimage walking in the last few years, and you know, reassigning, if you like, the routes, which of course were banned at one point in time. We go back to the period of the Reformation, and it got me to sort of ponder the whole concept of walking to a place, because I do actually think there's something very, very human about the thing of journeying somewhere. Whether that is a physical thing or whether that's a mental thing. And I think, obviously, we always look at pilgrimages as the idea of going to Jerusalem or wherever, but there are many pilgrimage sites in Britain that obviously go to sacred wells or sacred places, and that may have always been the case even before Christianity. Certainly a lot of people appeared to travel from Europe across to sites such as Stonehenge, and whether that's for healing or whatever, we obviously don't know. So, and also if we look at the development of Homo sapiens coming, you know, as the theory is coming out of Africa, then obviously there was a lot of walking involved. So, with that in mind, what I'm trying to get the measure of for myself here is, obviously this is only a short walk for me today, is to get the idea of what my motivator is, putting it in sort of very practical modern terms. What is it that I find helps me focus on what it is I to do, you know, not to get bored or not to think, oh, that's it, I've had enough type of idea. I have always walked. Obviously, an early part of my life, I did a lot of walking, as we all did, because you didn't get a lift anywhere, you just walked. So I'd walk miles every day to see friends, go to school, whatever. Didn't think anything of it. It was just what I did. And then I got into sort of orienteering type hiking. I used to sort of walk at night, you know, quite long distances, sort of speed, like a speed chase type of thing. And then of course life gets in the way, and then you're just doing this sort of walking, going for a walk with the kids type of thing, and what have you. So getting back into looking at doing a longer walk is quite interesting, because my motivation in the past would have been, I'm just going to this particular place, and I've discovered in myself that I find it difficult just going for a walk. I need to sort of go somewhere, so that I can sort of, everything. That's the end of the journey is that thing. And of course, if you look at that, there's a correspondence to the idea of going on a pilgrimage and going to a place or going to a series of places on the way. And it sort of focuses the intention. So understanding that within oneself, that's for me. Now I know a lot of other people are quite happy not to have that. But for me, it just seems to be what I have to do. And then I look at, using the sort of NLP thing of looking at how those characteristics will manifest in other places. I realise that's a very similar thing to my creativity. I have to have something that I'm, somewhere I've got to arrive, if you like, a gig or a recording or whatever. And I can then orientate myself to accomplish something. Now the problem then with that type of thinking for me is once I've accomplished the task, I created the thing, I have a problem with marketing. It's not that I can't, it's just that I can't be bothered often, and I know this is true with a lot of artists because they just want to get on to the next thing. So looking again at what I'm doing here, it's quite a long journey what I'm undertaking, which I'm not sure I'm going to do this. I've no idea whether I could do the whole lot or whether I just do a section of it and then create some songs along the way, record, do some podcasting, get some creative ideas, write some poetry. But then what do I do with that? Because it's almost like once that is done, it needs to be put out somewhere. And that has for quite some time been an issue for me. I can't seem to do what some of the other artists do, where they have a really keen eye on how to get their material out there. I mean, it's not a case that I can't do that. It's just in my own sort of mind, I've never really done what I think I could have done, if that makes sense. Okay, so the other interesting thing here is, with this, is being aware of what sort of kit I need. Again, one of the ideas behind this is not to go and buy a load of stuff, as to see whether I can do the type of thing that maybe people did in the past, which was to borrow. Maybe somebody could lend you something that would help you on your journey. Work with the good fortune of other people. Maybe travel with other people, which is another thought I've got in mind. So looking at the type of things that I've got to deal with the English weather is another important aspect. And obviously going in the depth of winter is not a good idea. And spring has often been very good over the last few years here, so that's a possibility. And just getting those sort of windows of time. So there's I'm trying at the moment, because of I've got this sort of way of thinking at the moment where I'm allowing ideas to come to me, allowing possible ways of looking at what I'm doing to come to me without necessarily sitting down and trying to plan them out. Otherwise, I end up doing what I did before, if you see what I mean. Now, that's an interesting creative point, which I think it's worth just bearing with a bit. I'm finishing a book off at the moment, which is getting people sort of proofreading it. And a lot of this is about how we could use creativity to manifest change, not only in ourselves, but in the world around us. And I think, my personal stance on where we are is we're in a bit of a problematic period. Putting it in, typical British understatement. We are perpetually making similar mistakes because of how we think about who we are and where we are in the world and our role in the world, as if we're something incredibly special, which I think actually we need to get away from that idea that we're supremely intelligent and, quote, we're the only intelligence in the universe and all this sort of nonsense that we keep telling ourselves. We just don't know. Obviously, we have no idea. And like a lot of things, when you think something, it precludes you from thinking of something else. So if you have that attitude that we are the supreme intelligence amongst the creatures, that blindsides you to anything else that could be thinking just differently to us, but by no means be less intelligent. So coming from a sort of perspective about who we are and what we do, I think a lot of the problems come from the fact that we have a continuing paradigm of thinking, and it's almost impossible to escape from it once you're in it. So once you've been through the educational system, you're already in that paradigm of thinking. The scientific model is that paradigm of thinking, which brings me back to the early, let's call it the early modern period. We would have called the medieval period. Maybe in the mistakenly called Dark Ages, which of course we realise were not dark at all. They were just different. There were other forms of thinking where you could just know an answer to something. You could have a revelation. Now, some people just think you're insane, but other people would consider your revelations as being, worth considering. And we tend not to think like that anymore, and particularly with this last period of time, with COVID and all the rest of it, any dissenting voices to the mainline narrative are roundly condemned to some sort of heresy. And the point is whether you agree with what people say or not. The point is that they may have a point, because often people have a point that is worth considering. They might take it to a perspective that you don't agree with, but they've arrived there somehow. And often people, it's very rare that you meet people that are completely and utterly mad, that have no logical connection to life at all. I don't even know if I've ever met one, to be quite frank. And I've met a lot of people. You might find some people that are sort of delusional, but even then when you talk to them, they speak about experiences that you think, well, they're having those experiences. They're not necessarily something that I experienced, but they're having them. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that their reality doesn't exist. It exists for them. And I think we need that ability to be so judgmental about attitudes of people, so that we can get some sort of how can I put this, creative revival in the way that we think, which then takes me to, who are the possible saviours of us, of humanity here. And I would say it's the children, and it's allowing children to be able to think differently to us, and not just be indoctrinated by what we tell them as if that's the only way, because again that just gives them the same paradigm that we're stuck in, and we're not going to get out of that problem then. So sort of putting my money where my mouth is, that's obviously the whole purpose behind the Ikaro music charities, to just get kids playing musical instruments and creating music and learning techniques that have got that that sort of lateral thinking techniques sewn into them, so that they begin to play with ideas that don't have that sort of logical, linear, scientific, data-driven evidence of it being successful. We need to sort of fail. We need to fail forward. We need to, in our failings, discover something uniquely different. We need to realise that sometimes a failing is a completely new perspective on things. And that sort of then brings me to another reason why I'm doing this walk, which is just me developing my level of fitness. About 2.5 years, 3 years ago now, 3 years ago, I had a heart attack and a stroke. So the heart attack was obviously very unexpected, and as somebody said to me once, of all the people on the list of having a heart attack, you weren't even on the list, right? So it gives you sort of an idea that no one is immune from having life events like that, obviously, because we all got to die sometime. That was sort of slightly understandable, because life has been complicated for me one way or another, as it is for a lot of people at various moments in my life. I've had a lot of events that have been, could have broken my heart. Lots of deaths and stuff. And but the thing that really got me was the day I was due to come out of hospital, which was literally 2 days later. I had a stent put in, and I was back up walking around and everything and whatever. I had a stroke, and okay, it was a very mild stroke, but nonetheless, it was it was a bit of a shock, to put it mildly, because I really did not see that coming. It just didn't occur to me that could happen. And losing an ability to communicate and to write and to be able to spell, and I couldn't speak for a period of time. I couldn't formulate my thoughts. I suppose I was frightened's not the word really. Bitterly upset, I think, was the word. And I felt for obviously all my family who obviously experienced that with me, because I just think they realised I was a bit close to the edge So, you know, I sort of made a vow that I would do what I could to get myself back. And one of the things was I walked. But of course, all these things bring an interesting lesson. And one of them, for me, was when I went into a hospital for like a sort of rehabilitation type, exercise program thing. And first of all, I've always eaten what I consider healthily, and I've done a lot of different things. So, over the years, eating sort of as a vegetarian and eating raw food and eating all sorts of things, and I've realised that probably the thing that worked best for me was just fasting, having much more of a diverse food source, eating meat and all the rest of it, but not eating very much, and certain days not eating hardly anything at all, and that seemed to work well for me, which again ties back into this sort of pilgrimage thing of, putting yourself on the edge, maybe not eating while you're, or only eating in the evening or whatever, taking limited amount of food with you. But I first of all was given loads of dietary advice by a nurse that was completely and utterly ridiculous, and somebody who's read, and my wife is really into sort of, I would call her an expert on all that sort of stuff. We were just gobsmacked about what we were told I should be eating. It was just completely so out of date. And then the next thing was I went for this exercise thing in amongst a lot of other people who were more really unwell, and I wasn't particularly, I didn't feel at the time. So, and first of all, the exercise routine was a bit of a, nearly did my head in actually, because there was some sort of dance routine, if you could call it that, and obviously there were a lot of people, men particularly, who just obviously couldn't follow directions. So when you were supposed to be moving to the left, everybody was moving to the right, type of thing, and most of this was going on in my peripheral vision, which had obviously was affected by the fact that I'd had a stroke anyway. And I just thought, my God, this is just, and of course it was to do with music and people being out of time, and it was just torturous. So I just thought, I can't do this. And a friend of mine's had a similar situation where something like that happened to him, and he said the same thing. So I know, because obviously everybody's lumped into the same model. You've had a heart attack, you've had a stroke, therefore you need to do this. And of course, life's not like that, is it? Of course, we're back to that idea of diversity against, the model of the data says that you're this type of thing. So the next thing was, after that particular meeting, there was a talk, and the talk was about medicine, the people's prescriptions that they had for heart attacks and all the rest of it. Well, that was so profound. It just made me realise I had to get out of there, because I just couldn't believe how can I put this in a nutshell, how different and how unable people were to be part of their own healing. So I'll explain what happened. There were a lot of people there who were, as I said, some of them were not zombie-ish, but not far off it. I mean, seriously, they They couldn't move very much. They weren't really that animated until they started talking about their medication. And then they became animated, and they knew the ins and outs of what they were taking, what it did, and all the rest of it. And it became almost, there was one particular thing which I won't recount, but it was almost like some sort of rah-rah, you know, thing that you see in America where everybody gets up and, you know, isn't it wonderful we're all here, let's, you know, oh God, it was unbelievable. And I thought in that moment, these people are almost like they're possessed by the medicine that they're taking. It was so weird. And I just thought, I don't want to be part of this. So I've worked at just really looking after myself, and so I'm sort of here in this point, you know, and quality of life for me is good. I enjoy doing what I do. I love being, and the sun's beginning to come out, so, you know, maybe everything is sort of agreeing with me on this from my own perspective. Now, obviously, this is my story. It's not anyone else's. But I think, you know, we need to find our own story, and this is the problem I see at the moment with just life generally, is that whose story are we telling? Is it ours, or is it just the one that we're being told that should be ours? And again, you know, a pilgrimage is not just a journey on foot on land, it's also a journey inside you. So, on that note, check out the show notes. There's a few things on Patreon and on all the sort of social media stuff about the work I'm doing. A lot of it is obviously free, especially getting kids playing music. So if you want to be part of that in any shape or form, you want to get your kids playing, we've got free instruments and all the rest of it if you're close enough to where I am. If not, there's lots of stuff online, and you can reach me from the show notes. So I've got some great guests lined up. So until next time, enjoy the weather.